Welcome. Thank you for joining and learning on how to stop selling and start helping the buyer buy. It's an interesting title. I hope you agree with me. And I'll show you in the next few minutes here that we're not just talking about semantics. Uh, we realize that words mean different things to different people. In fact, the identical words mean different things to different people. The uh, biggest problem that I've encountered with salespeople over the years is that selling is a negative emotion. Now we're going to start at that point. Let me introduce myself to you. My name is Greg Emmer. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and Vice President at Kaiser & Blair Incorporated. I've been with that company now for 25 years. And along with that business, and actually separate from that business, I've been doing consulting inside and outside the industry for almost as long. When we get into this concept of selling, one of the issues that has to be cleared up early on is what we actually do. And the biggest problem that I've encountered with people in this industry is that they confuse what we do with what we use. For people at the distributor and sales side of this business, we're not in the promotional products business. We're in the promotional advertising business. What we do is different than what we sell. Now, moving on, let's talk about what our clients, or the people that we're talking with, what they want as outcomes. The idea that we don't sell promotional products is because what we sell are outcomes. Now, we don't want to use the term sell because we want to stop selling, but the reality is that that's what our buyers want to buy. So now we're right into the meat and potatoes of what this whole presentation is about. We're going to stop selling and we're going to start helping the buyers buy. And what do they buy? They buy outcomes. They might want more sales. They might want to buy an outcome of stronger loyalty, both from their employees and their customers. They might want more referrals. They might want an increase in word-of-mouth advertising. They might want to generate a safer environment. They might want higher productivity. The thing is that none of these people wake up in the morning and say, gee, I feel like buying a bunch of coffee mugs today. Or, gee, wouldn't it be wonderful if I had ice scrapers to give out in the winter? That's not what they're interested in at all. What they're interested in is a very specific outcome. And being in the promotional advertising business, promotional marketing business, specialty advertising, if you think about all of those titles are about outcomes. Businesses are very willing to invest in the outcome they desire, so they would rather buy that than stuff from you. Now, one of the things that is critical is where you position yourself in the transaction. And I always call it sitting on the same side of the desk. When you become a co-buyer with your client, rather than being an adversarial relationship, you now become an advisor, somebody who your customer can count on to give you the proper information that you need. Because in a sales and buyer position, when you're the salesman and they're the buyer, you're setting up an adversarial relationship. They want to protect themselves from you. They want to protect their wallet from you. Remember, most of our clients, the people who we're selling to, they are also in business. And in their mind, every business has the same goal. You want to sell the most that you can at the highest possible profit. And that's not necessarily true with what we do, because what we're trying to get across to our customers, we're going to help them with their message delivery, as opposed to buying a commodity or something that you give away or put on a shelf. Now, there's always a chance that your customer is sitting wondering whether or not you're giving them the best advice when you're trying to sell something. But when you're helping them buy something, you can be absolutely giving them the best advice. In fact, time after time, a salesperson will sit down with a customer who says, I've been thinking about buying some coffee mugs. If then the promotional person picks up a catalog and opens up to the coffee mugs, they're not really separating themselves from anybody else in the industry. On the other hand, if they said to the customer, what are you planning to do with the coffee mugs? What would you like that to have as an effect on your business? You get into a completely different discussion. And you, as the professional, might want to recommend something other than a coffee mug if once you know the objective, you know a better way of making that objective happen. By having these kinds of conversations with your customer, the first thing that they're going to realize is that you're not part of the old ABC school of selling. If you're not familiar with ABC, it stands for Always Be Closing. That was probably a good suggestion for somebody who was in the automotive business selling used cars, or if they're trying to put a roof on your house. But when it comes to promotional advertising, you don't want to be closing. In fact, you never want to close the relationship. You want one of your projects to move you into the next project. So always be closing has no place in our industry. It's also extremely product focused. And once you become product focused, you run the risk of being compared to every website. And the only thing that you have to give other than a website is you, the professionalism of what you know and what you can do and the experiences that you've had. The most exciting part of selling outcomes is that you get to use that as a way of moving with your customer from one promotion to another. Let's say, for example, a customer has expressed a certain budget for you in order to reach a certain number of people with a very specific message. And you're able to give them a very good program, something that you know is going to accomplish every goal that they've set for you, but it's not necessary to use the entire budget. If when you make your suggestions to your customer, you also explain how you've saved enough of this budget to move them into the next thing that you're going to do several weeks or several months down the road, the chances of them shopping you, going someplace else, or coming up with different ideas gets to be very, very slim. Let's continue talking a little bit about identity. If you want to be in a position to help a buyer buy, as opposed to simply opening up your catalogs, staring at your tablet and looking at one product after another, in order for that to happen, you yourself have to be very clear about the business that you see yourself in. An article I wrote recently, which has gotten quite a bit of feedback, I challenge people to even look at the way that they identify themselves in this market. If your company name suggests that you sell products in any way, you're doing yourself and the potential for your customers a disservice. If you call yourself XYZ Promotional Products Company, all anybody's going to come to you for is product. They're not going to know that you're an expert who can give them advice. On the other hand, if your name of your company or the way you present yourself suggests to other people that you are, in fact, a knowledgeable professional in message delivery utilizing promotional marketing and specialty advertising, then you are moving yourself from an adversarial salesperson-buyer relationship to a relationship of a buyer and a co-buyer. You become that co-buyer. You help them cut through those sales type of pitches. Now, granted, when you're dealing with budgets and other things, a lower price is always good because you get to contact more people. You get to do it for a smaller budget. But price shouldn't be a part of your conversation if what you're being is a co-buyer. Budget should be. When you're talking about what it is that they'd like to accomplish, they're going to give you a clear description of the message they'd like to deliver and the people they'd like to deliver it to. When you add that to the budget that you have available, you very quickly come to what your cost per contact is going to be. And the suggestions that you make to work within that framework, you can discuss without ever talking about the price per item, which throws you right back into a product orientation. The goal here is to not have your discussions be product oriented in any way. As soon as you allow your discussions to become product oriented, rather than the good that its message delivery is going to be, you make yourself the same as everybody else as opposed to any differentiation that you might be trying to build with this customer. Remember, the goal is to become a co-buyer, and you can't do that if you've misidentified yourself. The next thing that I'd like to discuss is what we see as our industry being either advertising or marketing. The people sponsoring this training today call themselves the Advertising Specialty Institute. So they're pretty clear about what they think the industry is. We have an association that calls themselves the Promotional Products Association International. Not so clear, at least from my point of view. One organization is very interested in training, in message delivery, and in outcomes, which is ASI, which is why I'm here today doing what I'm doing. The Promotional Products Association may be a little bit, for today's marketplace, too focused on the product orientation. It may have been a good place to be 20 years ago when they changed their name, but today they are operating under a misnomer, something we've just cautioned you not to do. In order to keep this as simple as possible, I derived a clean, simple, four-word definition that describes the two. Advertising informs, marketing motivates. Now, the description, if you look in the dictionary, are much, much more complicated than this, but for the purposes of our industry and what we do, utilizing useful or decorative or interesting items to be the vehicle to carry messages to a specific group of people, those messages are going to be either advertising or marketing. If advertising informs and marketing motivates, you can see it clearly, for example, if you are checking out of a store and the clerk takes your money, gives you your change, and says, "Thank you for shopping with us. Here's a new coffee mug." That's advertising. On the other hand, if you're there shopping because you saw an ad that says, "Free coffee mug with every purchase," that's marketing. What's the difference? One motivates, the other one informs. The ad certainly gave you information that there's a free coffee mug, but you showed up at that place of business. Your actions, what you did, you were motivated to go there at that time because they were giving you something free. There is no way to really put a measure on it in our industry, but in day-to-day operations, you may find that most of what we do is marketing as opposed to advertising, though we still call it specialty advertising. But knowing the difference can help you build programs for your customers, because you can discuss with them whether they want to put a message out there that people hear, in most cases for them to act on at a future time, or are you trying to motivate that person to do something that they otherwise would not have done without that motivation? That's why you see a lot of people respond to circulars in print advertising, which has a very definite date that they're operating. Come in before Friday or you lose this opportunity. It's advertising to be sure, but it's motivational advertising, which makes it marketing. So without trying to confuse you, if you keep those terms in mind, what you'll know is that when you put a program together, if it's for immediate reaction, it's probably going to be marketing. And the message that you want to put out to support that activity has to let somebody know what's going on, what free gift is being given, if they come and collect it, if there's a call for them to patronize a certain company or buy a certain product. That information has to be known to those people one way or another. If it's simply advertising, if you're simply saying, here's a wonderful ice scraper, and the message on it says free towing service. If a service station were to give that out, it is advertising pure and simple, because when you hand it to somebody, they're not in need of free towing service. But at some point in the future, they very well may be. Now it becomes motivational because the towing service is free. From the advertiser's standpoint, it's a really wonderful offer because in most cases, the car that's being towed into their facility, they're going to be the ones doing the repair work on it. So let's go back, let's go forward here, and we're going to talk about what communication is and what the difference is between communication and marketing. Many times you will have a conversation. Any of you who are parents out there know you've had conversations with your children. You know you said the words you wanted to say. You know that they've heard what you do, but nothing changes. That means that it wasn't marketing. You did not get that child to do something they otherwise wouldn't have done without the communication. So when we look at putting together programs, we have to be very clear about what the messaging is that we want and what the reaction is that we want that messaging to create. To simply have communications isn't enough. How many times have you been in a what we'll call sales call, and you find that small talk, which is still communication, takes most of the activity with a few minutes at the end for anything that's productive? There was lots of communication going on. There was no marketing. You did not cause that customer to do something they wouldn't have done without the communication. So from the standpoint of somebody who's active in this industry, trying to become a co-buyer, what you have to make sure is that you keep the attention of the person you're talking to focused on their outcome. And you can do that by early on getting a clear understanding of what their outcome is and then staying on that outcome through all of the conversation that you have. A way that I've found to get right to the outcome is to ask your customer, what is the most important thing that you are working on right now? That is a much different question that many salespeople use. The questions that you hear a lot from salespeople are, I'm here to solve your problems. What's the biggest problem you're having right now? I'm a problem solver. We have great deals on some items that can really make your people happy. In every case, with those types of pitches, you are in fact selling. You're making the assumption that this businessman can't run his business without your help. You're not focusing on what it is that the customer wants to invest in. If you go in with a preconceived notion, it can be just as bad. If you walk in and say, I'm here to improve sales. What if employee turnover is the biggest problem this person is working on and you're telling him you're going to generate more sales? The last thing he wants to hear about is more sales. He can't deal with the customers he's got now because he has no employee loyalty. So you want to make sure that you ask a very specific question that will help you get on the same side of the desk as your buyer. You want to become a co-buyer and help him reach his outcomes. So the question again is, what is the most important thing you're working on right now? And the next thing that your customer says to you will give you either a very specific outline of the outcome that you can help with, or at least identify what the particular thing they're working on is. So what can they be? I see my customers across the street shopping at my competitor. Your brain should say customer loyalty program. I get nothing extra out of my staff whatsoever. They punch in on time, they punch out on time, but nothing happens all day long. You can see that as an employee incentive program. When they talk about any of the issues that are affecting them at that moment, your brain should start thinking program. And when they take a breath, you say, I can help you with that. And start formulating what your program is going to be. If a customer said to you, I'm tired of seeing my customers across the street, you say, I can help you with that. We can do a customer loyalty program for you that will have your customers coming back to you time after time. What would it be worth to you to have a customer who thinks of you first every time? And see what they say. Now you're starting to develop a budget. The client is going to create his own budget. You don't have to pull it out of them. As you work in this regard, sitting on the same side of the desk, becoming a co-buyer, you are not involved in selling any longer. The main magazine published by the people sponsoring this training is called Counselor. The idea is that you are going to become a counselor. That is what the industry has always intended to be, but we have been moved further and further away from that because we now, in many cases, are guilty of thinking of what we do in a product-oriented commodity mindset. Change that. Change it in yourself, change it in your customer, and what you'll see is that you will become a co-buyer and you'll see your sales increase. Now let's get more specific about how you gather this information. We're going to talk a little bit about budgets. The idea of price takes you right back to the product. The minute you start talking about price, you can't be talking about anything other than the product. And since the product is a vehicle for carrying the message that your client wants in order to reach an outcome, you don't want to be talking about the product. You want to be talking about the outcome. For example, if what you were selling was radio airtime, you wouldn't be trying to sell your client transmitters or receivers, would you? You'd be trying to get them to understand that the message that you're going to deliver is where the value is. Well, we're no different from that. That yes, there is a price on each one of these items, but that's not what the client is interested in investing in. They're interested in investing in the message delivery. So in order to get the information you need, we want to talk about prices, not about prices. We do want to investigate the quantity. That means how many people do you want to reach with this message, the contacts. And we want to talk about messaging, not imprint. Imprint is product-oriented. Quantity is product-oriented, and price is product-oriented. So if you've gotten your client to start moving with you, allowing you to sit on the same side of the desk with them, if what you're doing is moving that client away from the product orientation and firmly focused on the outcome, the last thing you want to do is yank them back into their former reality, which is the price for a certain number of products, because you will lose them as they start moving forward. There was a man named Victor Kiam who did commercials for the Remington Electric Razor Company, who liked the product so much that he ended up buying the company. Victor Kiam was a person who did a huge amount of sales training in his time, and he spoke about painting vistas. Now, what he meant by painting vistas was helping your client see, physically in their mind's eye, see what you're going to accomplish for them. That is where when you come up with the objective, when the client identifies what it is that they'd like to see happen, it's up to you to paint that vista. If they decided that you were going to help them with customer loyalty, and you, with the budget that's been made available to you and the client contact that you're going to have and the length of message that you got to deliver, if you decided that, for example, a collection of commemoratives would be a way for you to get people to come back into that business on a regular basis, you have to start talking about the commemorative coin that you're going to strike for this client, with their message on one side and whatever the commemorative is going to commemorate on the other. And maybe there's going to be a collector's wallet for it. And you're going to go into descriptions about how this is going to engage the public, how the public is going to react to it, how it's going to create traffic in his store. And you do this all without showing them a catalog. When you show them a catalog, it goes right back to giving them an idea that everything goes to a product as opposed to the concept. So don't do anything to reignite a product orientation. there's a really important aspect to every engagement that you have with your customer. And that engagement is what I call answering the unasked question. And quite simply, that unasked question is, what's in it for me? Think about that. 1 second here. The what's in it for me is the question that every single person, business or otherwise, thinks about whenever you're making a suggestion to a client. They want to know without asking what's in it for me, so they don't want to sound rude, and it's your job to tell them. So when you have a client who's identified an objective, you've gone through all the steps necessary for them to explain their budget, the number of contacts, the message that they'd like to deliver. When all this is said and done, and now you're into painting the vistas, that's where you're answering their unasked question. You're going to help them understand where they're going to be after they do the project that you've outlined for them. The idea of painting vistas, I don't think originated with Victor Kiam, but I think that his embracing of it is what propelled his business to the heights that it did. He's written a couple of books. He's actually a marketing guru, and this concept of painting vistas was something that I personally employed for all the years that I was out in the marketplace doing exactly the work that you're doing now. And the thing that always amazed me was how readily your clients, the people you're talking to, will want to go down that road with you. If you take them with you and ask permission and say, can I give you an example of where I think you're going to be shortly after we employ this program? Here's what I think you're going to see. This is what I think is going to happen. You'll be surprised at how readily they will accept this, move along with you, and start participating in it. One of the things that I, again, personally experienced, which was no guarantee that you're going to find the same thing, but time after time, when you got to the point of painting your vistas, the client would expand on what they originally said they wanted to do. They increased the number of people they'd like to contact, which automatically increased their budget. They said, well, what are we going to follow this up with? Because they were so engaged in what you've already explained to them. But the case that I'd like to relate to you right now is one that I do talk about when I'm doing training because it exemplifies everything else that I've said. I sat down with a client. The client was a very large grocery chain, and they were working on trying to make certain parts within that grocery a destination as opposed to something you walk by while you're in the store. So they wanted their fish department to become the fish market. They wanted their bakery department to become the bakery. They wanted people to come to their store because they wanted to buy their fresh fish there, and they'd buy other stuff in the rest of the supermarket while they're there. They wanted the produce section to be the greengrocer. They wanted to go back to their roots when all these used to be separate businesses along a small main street, but now they're housed under one great big superstore. And the first that they were going to do this with was, in fact, their dairy department. They wanted to make sure that they had the volume up. They wanted to make sure in the days when the cases were loaded from the front, not in the back, that the employees rotated the stock. And by putting fresh stock out there, they could then advertise that they were the dairy at this particular merchant. But getting the employees to rotate that stock was exceedingly difficult because if nobody was listening, it was easier to push the milk in the front of the cabinet instead of the back. So they told me what budget they had. They told me the population in the dairy department in 4 of the stores they wanted to test this in. I came back and sat down with the dairy manager at their headquarters and said, look, I've put together a program for you. It's within your budget. We can operate the program between the time constraints of when you wanted it to start and when you wanted it to stop. It will absolutely cause the employees to rotate that stock more often and properly. And with your say-so, we can get started on it right now. And the client stood up behind his desk, shook my hand, and said, "That's fabulous. Let's get going." And I was almost out of his office before he stopped me and said, "What are we doing?" I painted a vista for him where the product, the method, how we were actually going to accomplish it was of no interest to this customer at any point. All he wanted to know is that we were going to accomplish exactly what he said he wanted to accomplish. If you start employing these skills, what you'll find is that that will happen more often than not. If the product is anything other than the last thing you discuss, you're doing it wrong. Because until you know what it is that the customer is willing to invest in, until you know that, you can't plan anything else. So to show a product is not the best way to go. Now, there is one codicil to that. There is an exception. Many, many times when you're doing everything that I've explained how to do, your client will talk about something that they want to do in the future and give you some idea of why they want to do it. Let's say you're working with a client in the middle of February, and the client says, "I can't wait for spring. I've already polished up my golf clubs. They're sitting in the back of my car. The first beautiful day I'm out of there. And you know what? I'd really like to do golf caps for some of my buddies this year and maybe for a few other people." You say, "I'll make a note of that and I'll talk to you about that when the time is appropriate." And when you call him back, you're saying, "You said you wanted to buy some golf caps." So in a situation like that, you are looking at a product-oriented sale because that's what your customer asked you for in the future. Exclusive of that, there is rarely a circumstance where you cannot be far more successful doing it with the product last and the objective first, and mapping out a strategy that will get your client from where they are now to where they want to be. Unfortunately, we don't have questions and answers when you do a seminar the way that you're receiving this one. Hopefully, I've answered the questions that you may have had. I always give an offer that anybody who would like to contact me personally, I will give you a few minutes of my time with specific questions for specific answers, and I'm happy to do that for ASI. Again, my name is Greg Emmer. I'm the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Kaeser & Blair, and I can be reached at GEMMER at Kaeser, KAESER -Blair, BLAIR.com. Thank you very much.